Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you my drafting Season 1 of the new Goosebumps show video. Been wanting to make this for a while. Been wanting to make this, I've kind of preluded this with the 15 stories I would love to see adapted, and the 15 remakes I would love to see made. And a lot of people told me what episodes they would love to see made, and what stories they would love to see adapted that never were adapted, and that was a fun time. And now I'm at the point where I think I'm ready to start predicting or fantasy drafting my Season 1. We're really far out from the first season, so I think right now this is a fun topic to talk about since everything is open for speculation. Nothing here is actually confirmed or 100% proven. This is just us talking in hypotheticals and theoreticals. If we got to pick stories to adapt, this is what we would choose and why. So, for starters, I'm going to let you guys know I picked 16 episodes in my draft. What 16 episodes would you adapt for Season 1 and why? You don't have to put why for each one. Just maybe give a summary at the bottom. If you leave your 16, put why or a brief description why you chose these episodes. Or you think Season 1 would be better off if they had these episodes in the first season to help the viewership, whatever reason it is, just let me know. Okay. So, my criteria, I took into account the show's budget. I don't want the show to be counting pennies by the end of Season 1 because they spent all their money. I chose episodes that would be high in budget, like up here, and then some that would be relatively cheap or low in budget, so when it averages out, it'll be about here. So one concentric budget can fit all of these stories. I also wanted to flex the show and the creators and the writers and the producers on the show's capabilities of telling horror. You know, horror and humor is in the source material, that's a given, but this is different types of horror I'm bringing up. We got sci-fi, psychological horror, body horror, extreme visual horror, and of course your average monster jump scare stuff. I want to test to see what they can do. Test the atmosphere that builds in the episode. The acting choices. Do they have good actors? Are they able to act good? Because sometimes in that old show, the acting is what killed the episode, not the production. It was the bad acting. All of that encompasses into the final product. And I think these would be really good episodes. Personally, on my draft list, I think the ones I picked will definitely highlight or accentuate all the different qualities that I think the production studio needs to have to put the show on and do it right. And if they mess these up, it's safe to say that the ones I picked are pretty good telltale signs. If they mess any of these up, they'll pretty much mess up anything else. So, with that being said and taken into consideration, let's get into the ones I picked. Now, I said in my Things the New Goosebumps TV Show Must Do video, I did say that for me, I would love to see representation of all different Goosebumps series in each season. But then I heard people's opinions and read up and followed up on other videos that people have put out. And they said that they would like to see more classic 62 representation in Season 1. They think that's more important. So for me, I kind of adopted from what I said before in those videos, and I blended them together because I agree on both sides. So what I did was I made a list centered around 11 Classic 62 books for episodes, and then the rest, the other 5, are from other series that aren't the Classic 62. And I try to be fair. I try to pick ones that I think would be worth making, at the same time get people excited for future seasons and leave people with a good taste in their mouth with this show. So with that in mind, I picked 16 episodes because some people were picking 6, some people were picking 26. I said in my last video that 13 to 16 seems like a fair number, so I went with the high end with 16 and rolled with it. Now, the order of these episodes, there is no real order. I just wrote them down in order that they came to mind. The first 11 on my list are just Classic 62. It doesn't matter what air date it is to me as long as they get made. If that matters to you, fine, whatever, but I just have them written down. And then same thing with the final 5 and my 16 draft picks. So let's get into my list. But before we get into my list, please leave a comment in the comment section what 16 episodes that you would draft for season 1 of the new Goosebumps TV show. So now let's get into my draft. So episode 1 and episode 2 go hand in hand because of Slappy. Slappy has so much material. He has so much material to cover. It's borderline egregious. So it's a given that we'll probably have 2 Slappy stories a season. So fitting for season 1, you start from the beginning of Slappy. I started with Night of the Living Dummy as my first episode draft pick. My second episode draft pick would be Night of the Living Dummy 2. One was never made, one was made, it was kind of bad. Either way, they need to be made. Especially Night of the Living Dummy 1. It's about time Mr. Wood gets some screen time. I know we all want to see it. That book is so good, it's so graphic. There's so many iconic scenes in that first book. Then the second book, this is really where Slappy becomes the main character, and this is a pretty important book to Slappy to make better than the old show did. So they go hand in hand. You need to have both. You can't just have one, you need both in the season 1. So that's why I drafted them as my first and second pick. My third draft pick is a camp story. Now, I could have chosen many options of camp stories. There's so many camp stories in Goosebumps. But I wanted to pick a classic 62 camp story, and I went with one I see people constantly clamoring for. I know I want to see Ghost Camp so bad, but there's another book that I want to see adapted, or I drafted, that I think kind of encompasses the same urban legend feel. Maybe not to the extent of Ghost Camp, but I'm fine with getting to Ghost Camp at another point. I think the first one to get knocked out, because it doesn't have a sequel, people have been dying for it since the beginning, the horror at Camp Jelly Jam. It'd just be cool to see King Jelly Jam eating some kids. This would be a fun one to see what they're allowed to get away with as far as subject matter, because you have a murderous, gelatinous monster eating kids that are pretty much enslaving children. This would be a cool, episode to get into. So I want to see that one made. The little kid in me gets excited every time I think about that. So that's one I drafted it pretty high on my draft list. That was the first one that come to mind. I try to balance it out and make it about half and half, where half of them are remakes from the old show and half of them are episodes we never got to see made. So keep that in mind as we go down my list. Number 4, I went with the winter themed one because I think this one is slightly better than some of the holiday Goosebumps stories. I did want to pick a holiday one, but I think this one would be a fair start for the winter themed books or episode subjects, and I went with Beware the Snowman. This one would be higher on the budget list, but hear me out on this. This one will have a heartfelt story, and it'll be worth telling it, because the setting alone would be imaginative. This will flex the ability the production team has of building atmosphere. The horror is there too, in subtle ways, but this one would be a really good testing block to see what they can do and what they can produce. So that's why I want to see this one made. So that's why I drafted it. Great. My 5th draft pick is, this one, I teetered on this one in Monster Blood probably for a good 2 days, and I ultimately decided with this one over Monster Blood, because Monster Blood you can easily get to in season 2 onward and be just fine. But this one I felt that they should get to it in season 1, because there's so many stories that feature this type of monster, and I think this would be a great pick. Plus, they never made it in the old show, and that is The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Regardless if you like the book or not, I think the setting would be there. The atmosphere of the pyramid and the mummies itself could be gross. I want to see what they're able to do. I kind of personally want to see a homage to the Universal Monsters mummy that R.L. Stine got the inspiration from with this book. But nonetheless, be fun to see it, just because they never made it. That's why I drafted it. And then my 6th draft pick is the last of the books that were never made in the original show. And the reason why I chose this one is I think this one would have a very sad, depressing note to it. And I kind of want to see where the writing will go on the serious tones. Kind of like the same premise with Beware the Snowman. I want to see the heartfelt stories done. But this one is really creepy, and this one's like very bizarre at the same time. It goes to dark elements, and I think all ages would really identify with this story. So I chose The Haunted School. Have a school atmosphere type story. It's kids horror. Where do kids go? They go to school. It'd be fun to tell. I was teeter-tottering on this one and Creature Teacher for a while, but I ended up choosing this one just to have more classic 62 representation in the first season. As Creature Teacher, you can easily get to that at any point. But yeah, The Haunted School. Really good book, really great premise. All you have to do is adapt that book, and you pretty much got an A+ episode on your hands. My draft pick number 7. This one, now we're getting into the remake territory. I almost didn't put this one on this list, on my draft picks. I almost didn't consider it for season 1, because I know if they mess it up this early, it would be damaging to the show, and I didn't want to have this episode on season 1 to risk the new show and the reputation of the new show. But then again, fans would be expecting this one, and it's almost a no-brainer it's going to happen. So I went ahead and said, why not? I could have picked Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns for the Halloween stories. I could have picked Headless Halloween. I almost put down Headless Halloween instead of my 7th pick, but I went ahead and said, why not? Let's do The Haunted Mask. Now, I say this with the utmost importance to, if there happens to be show people that are working on the show out there watching this, there's 2 episodes on my draft pick that if you get to in season 1, I promise you fans will be really, monumentally upset with you if you get wrong. One of them being Haunted Mask. If you mess this episode up, people will be PO'd. I'm telling you. Next level. So you got to put some fan service into this episode specifically. This was the fan favorite episode from the old show. This is R.L. Stine's all-time favorite book. It has one of the best stories ever in Goosebumps. Just adapt the book, get some good actors, some of the best characterization already written there. You can just adapt it, record it on screen, get some good scenery, get that emotion of Halloween in the episode, capture that, okay? Make sure the mask looks good, and then you're pretty much okay. Don't mess with it. Just make it good. Okay? Alright, so draft pick number 8. This one I've been wanting to see remade forever because I'm a comic book fan. I think this one would be a good place to see where they would treat the comic book related stories. Also, pacing. Pacing is the ultimate test with this episode. That's why I drafted it. Attack of the Mutant. This is the ultimate test. Are they able to make comic book stories scary on the show? And 2, are they able to do pacing correctly? If they can do both good, awesome. Also, this one wouldn't be too high on the budget since the layer of the mutant is pretty much the only budget consuming thing in the episode. They don't really have to focus on the layer as much that comes near the end. So this one's kind of in the middle ground, so this one wouldn't be too hard to make. That's why I put it on my list. Draft pick number 9. Now this one honestly, I solely picked this one for season 1 because it's budget friendly and it's low budget. Thinking on that wavelength of thought. Plus, I actually was genuinely scared from the classic series episode they did of this story. I just think there's some elements of visual horror in this story that people don't give enough credit to on screen. Maybe the people don't like the book as much. I've heard plenty of people say they don't like this book, but on TV it's actually pretty scary. And I went with Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. It has really good messages about meeting strangers and a murderous psychopath. killing kids for their body parts. It's really bizarre. I think it'll be a fun story to tell. It's kind of on the humorous side, kind of on the dark humor side. I think adults would like this one. Plus, I want to see the book's ending adapted. So that's why I drafted it. I think this one will be a safe bet. Pretty reasonably cheap to make, so that's why it's on. All right, so number 10. Producers, if you happen to be watching this, again, if you mess this one up, if you attempt this one and you mess this up, people are going to picket you outside. They're going to picket your building because they're going to be upset. This is a beloved book from the Classic 62. Also, this is one of the best episodes they ever made on the old show. I cannot stress this enough. You need to capture the essence of the feeling of the urban legend that's in this book, the look of the werewolf, the unsettledness and the disturbing aspects to the kids and the swamp hermit. You need to capture this. I cannot stress this enough. The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. You know, this was pretty much going to be on season 1 no matter what for me. This was one of the few episodes on my draft that stayed on pretty much every iteration of the draft I picked before I made this video and settled with this list. I just think this is such an important one to put your stamp on first, because this will show what they're allowed to get away with body horror, as in transformations, biting, maybe even violence. This is a perfect guinea pig for all the other deep layered stories that Goosebumps has to offer. I want to see what they can get away with here. So yeah, Werewolf of Fever Swamp. Make sure you do it good. That's all I have to say. And then my 11th draft for season 1, I went on a heavy budget. There's a couple below this one that are high in the budget too, but this one is such a good story. This one would be worth the money to put together and make. But you gotta focus on it. You gotta focus on every little detail, because this will wow the viewers. This will wow the casuals that aren't fans of Goosebumps, and maybe they've never read Goosebumps before. This one could be an instant classic. A shocker on Shock Street. I cannot stress enough how many fans that are fans of Goosebumps are general horror fans. This book is written about horror fans. Most horror fans and most adrenaline junkie fans love to go to amusement parks. This kind of blends it together, a theme park. Look at what the old show did wrong. They took a ghost town playset, basically, and made an episode in cheap CGI and recycled props on the set. Don't do that. Make it scary. I know you have that praying mantis thing from the first movie. Please add that. People want to see that so badly. Just look at the source material and spend some focus on that one. If that's where most of the budget has to go, I'm fine with that. If you have to axe Beware the Snowman or something else, be my guest. But personally, this one, reason why I drafted it is because I think this one would get everyone excited, because if they can do this, they can do One Day at Horrorland really good. They can do Escape from the Carnival of Horrors. They can do so many fun, atmospheric, summertime feels. They can do Night in Werewolf Woods. I mean, the list goes on. That's why I chose this one. It's a good starting place, and it's made for horror fans, so why not? All right, so now we're in the territory outside of Classic 62 that I drafted onto my list. So I did pick some Series 2000. I did pick some Hall of Horrors, and I did pick some Give Yourself. Now, I ultimately settled with what I settled because I think for season 1, these stories definitely exemplify different feels and different methods of telling horror. And this is an ultimate test to the show, like I said. I want to see what they're capable of. So I picked a sci-fi pick, and it might be obvious to you if you've been on this channel and watched my videos in the past. 12 and 13 are pretty much together. And that's Invasion of the Body Squeezers, Part 1 and Part 2, because the books are separated in parts. I can't stress enough, you need to rework the Body Squeezers from whatever the abomination that was in the first movie. We don't know what that is. that does not look like body squeezers that we know on the covers. You really got to go back and rework the body squeezers. You have to capture the body horror, the science fiction, the world is ending atmosphere that book entails. You need to capture that. Make the spaceships look cool. Give the body squeezers the powers as in the book. And that is absolutely gross. I'm not going to lie, it'll probably gross people out, but it'll scare the mess out of people if you do it. You just got to do it. I mean, you have nothing to lose here. So yeah, Invasion of the Body Squeezers for 12 and 13 in my draft. All right, so my 14th draft pick, this one is a special one for me. This is one of my all-time favorite Goosebumps stories. I can't stress this enough. This is one of my favorites. And it has nothing to do with monsters. It has nothing to do with ghosts. It just has to do with extreme situations and visualization. And there's some really sound messages, some very excellent written supporting characters and main character in this book. It is a masterpiece in Goosebumps. It truly is a masterpiece. I have yet to see a person say they hated this book or disliked this book in any way. You have to make this one first season. I know it's kind of centered around Halloween time, but it's more about the fall atmosphere. That's the most important thing to capture. It's a pseudo-Halloween book. It doesn't take place on Halloween, but it's pseudo-Halloween. Capture that feel. Capture the emotions that are in this book. Are you terrified yet? That's the book. I mean, some of the best supporting characters ever. Some of the most creepiest, realistic scenes ever are in this book. It would be so low budget that all you have to do is shoot the simplest of scenes and it will work the most magic for the audience, because this story is so creepy and so funny, and it's just a blend of perfectness. I recommend this one for season 1. I think people would really respond well to this, especially if it's well made and you have some good actors portraying those well-written characters in the book. It would be a home run episode. That's why it's in my draft. All right, so getting down to near the bottom here. My 15th draft pick, I went with something new school, something post-2008, something relevant to the younger audience that grew up with smart technology. This one, when I reviewed it, I thought that this one was brilliant. I thought that this was very different from your average Goosebumps book, and it tells such a bizarre and just utterly suspense-filled story that made me feel uneasy throughout the whole time, but in a good way. This story has some tremendous scenes to display on TV, like especially with, there's a scene with multiple TVs in a Best Buy location where they're selling TVs, and this being pops up on all these TVs. So creepy, such a good story. Some really good characters in this story as well. I recommend Don't Scream from Hall of Horrors. Brilliant book. This one will play on the more AI fears and technology fears. It's not necessarily a monster. It's more of a psychological story. Flex the Muscles production team. This one would be worth making, and it's not going to cost you all that much to make it, as long as you execute it well. It'd be a fantastic episode. And then my 16th draft pick. Now, I decided to go with a Give Yourself Goosebumps story. I only just chose one in the first season because this would be kind of a testing ground. One edge the new Goosebumps show could have over Are You Afraid of the Dark and all of its competitors, especially if it's on streaming, is the capability of having choose-your-own-adventure episodes on the streaming platform. And the best way I can describe this, producers, if you're listening, look at Black Mirror. Look at the episode where the audience was able to click through all the options and go through different points in the story and have different endings and what have you. This is what you should do for Give Yourself Goosebumps. I mean, you can just pick a plot line in the book and just roll with that as the episode, but I think people really would appreciate a choose-your-own-adventure episode. Okay? So, I really only had 2 in serious consideration, given that, personally, I think that having another Halloween-type story is needed. I could have picked something else, but I didn't want to pick anything too budget-heavy. So I wanted to pick something that takes place in one location, that doesn't jump around point A to point B to point C, It's all in one location, and sure, they have point A, point B, point C, but it's all one concentric set. So I picked one for that reason. But then the other one came to mind. Somebody said, well, they should do Please Don't Feed the Vampire because they've already introduced the vampire poodle in the movie, and they've already reprinted the book. People know about that one. So I was like, okay. So after weighing my options with the one I chose and the one Please Don't Feed the Vampire, I was like, well, I think this one is a safer bet because it's a better story. And I think that the horror would be there. That creepy haunted house feel with the monsters, the ghosts. It kind of encompasses all flavors of horror as far as monsters go. And there's some really good scenes in this book that will creep people out so badly. Not to mention it's so funny dealing with the best friend in this book. It's hilarious, the dynamic between the main character and the best friend. So I chose One Night in Pain House to be the first Give Yourself Goosebumps book for season 1 in my draft. And I decided to have it basically by itself as the only Choose Your Own Adventure episode in this draft because it's simple in premise. It takes place all in one haunted house. There's some really scary scenes. It deals with monsters and ghosts. I think everyone will have something about it that they would enjoy, and it's just really imaginative and funny. And there's some gross scenes, some really frightening scenes in it. I think you can't go wrong with that. So yeah, that was my season 1 draft for the new Goosebumps show. Like I said before, let me know down in the comment section, everyone watching, what 16 episodes would you draft for season 1? I'm dying to know. And until next time, see you later.